I'm Jim Knight, co-founder of the Instructional Coaching Group, and you're listening to Coaching Conversations, where I talk with coaching experts from around the world so that all of us can learn better ways to make an unmistakably positive impact on the people around us.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Coaching Questions Show on the Coaching Conversations podcast with Jim Knight. This show is for everyone that calls the Instructional Coaching Group home for all your instructional coaching content. These episodes are designed for everyone who desires to think and learn alongside Jim and myself as you continue to make an impact with all the great work you do. I'm Jessica Wise, a proud member of our ICG consultant team. Today's episode is a chance for us to showcase our amazing TLC 2025 keynote speakers and to talk briefly about what their podcast episodes were about and what they left us thinking. Once our Q&A has come to a close, we'll have an epilogue or a final note at the end of the show with a couple of notes to wrap up our discussion before we sign off. So, on with the show. Morning, Jim.
Jessica, it's good to see you. Greatest hits. I'm excited about the greatest hits. This is going to be fun.
Yes, I'm excited too. And then we have this one last keynote that we need to talk about from this guy, Dr. Knight.
That's been such a life-giving activity, creating that keynote. What it is it's life lessons. So I've interviewed all these people, some of them in their 90s, most of them with a fair bit of experience. And every conversation has been, it's kind of a gift for me to hear what they have to say. As some of the people have been in tears talking about what matters in their lives. And I think it's been rewarding for them to reflect and talk about what they're dealing with. So it's been a wonderful project, but it's, the whole conference is learning from experience. And my feeling is, well, let's talk about life experience. What have people learned from life? That's how we start the conference. Then we'll look at learning from experience, whether it's creating an instructional playbook or it's learning from experience about dealing with resistant teachers or supporting coach, all kinds of expertise. And of course, we have the greatest hits right now. So away we go.
Well, this sounds like it will be a profound keynote, Jim. Way to start TLC 2025 off right. I can't wait to hear it.
I want to just burn people out right from the start. They should leave the room emotionally wrecked. And so they're, that's the plan.
Get ready, first breakout session leaders.
Right.
Here they come with their tissues in hand.
The stories about love I've heard, just one little small thing, but also time, priorities, being fully present, things like forgiveness, gratitude, super, super powerful, beautiful stories. And then I've read other stories too, about heroic things people have done, selfless things. And then you hear the story and you go, that is true. That is a well-lived life right there. So anyway.
Well, it also sounds like it might influence our leading yourself and leading others sessions, because what you're talking about is similar to what we discuss in those sessions.
It'll be interesting to see. I haven't thought about that. I haven't gone that far right now. I'm just kind of putting the pieces together. Well, Austin feverishly waits to say, when are you going to send me those videos, Jim?
It's not like the conference is next month or anything.
No.
Well, awesome. So, Jim, I'm excited today for our greatest hits episode, and I'm up first. So we'll look at a clip from each of these keynote speakers episodes that you had with them, and then we'll just chat about it afterwards. So everyone, if you're interested in checking out these episodes, you can always come back and watch all these speakers in their glory in their full episodes in our podcast. So up first, Jim, is Uliana Urtubey, the 2021 National Teacher of the Year, who advocates for a joyous and just education for all students. And I was really inspired when I listened to her podcast. Talk about needing a tissue. There were moments where I had to pause and think, oh my gosh, that's really profound. I especially liked her ideas about joy and relating to others and representation. So I have one clip, though, that really stood out to me. I'm going to play that for you now.
Great.
Talk to teachers across the country and you ask them, why are you an educator? And you love to hear the stories about people who had teachers in their family or teachers who believed in them and transformed their lives. You love to hear those stories. And then you also understand the people who have the opposite side of the story. They have a teacher who didn't believe in them, and that propelled them so much to want to be a different kind of teacher. So I think we all are really informed by our own schooling and our own upbringing in how we show up in the classroom and educational spaces. For me, my parents just are lovely, incredible people who really always encouraged us to speak Spanish at home. Spanish was the language we spoke, and it was a way to preserve not just our identity, but to preserve our connection to each other. And so I was really motivated by that to ensure other students could have more than one language. For me, it's never made sense why sometimes people operate in this country as if we want to be a monolingual country. We don't. There's so much linguistic diversity in this country that deserves to be nurtured. And so I think I grew up with that kind of fire, that advocacy, and wanting to build spaces where that could become a reality.
Okay, so Jim, this stood out to me because she shared a story that you wouldn't know if you just looked at her. It's kind of hidden in who she is. And I believe that we all have stories that are hidden in who we are. And I believe in this so much that students have these stories and we can't always see them just by looking at them. Something I believed as a teacher, as a parent, I try to instill this in my children that you never know what people's stories are, what they're living through. But I'm wondering, Jim, first of all, what your response is to that clip and maybe even the implications of this idea of people have stories and what that means for coaches.
Well, I'm very interested in multilingual, because I grew up in a bilingual country, Canada. Both official languages are English and French. And I felt it was a duty to learn French. And yet at the same time, I've never really mastered it by any stretch. I can order food in a restaurant. I just don't know if I'm going to get what I want, so I can sort of fake it, but I would like to be much more fluent in French than I am. Kansas isn't really a hotbed of Franco linguistics, um, but I would like to. So I like what she's saying in terms of just. I've also felt too that Canada as a country, a multilingual country, was so much better by having both languages. So when I lived in the Rockies as a youngster, a teenager, and in my 20s, we celebrated the French holidays and the Canadian and the Canadian English holidays. And so Saint Jean Baptiste Day was a big celebration. It's kind of like it's like July 4th for Quebec. And it was we were just so much better because we had a richness to the cultural diversity. I could learn about aspects of life because of that culture. So the first thing I think that's really cool. Um, I'm really cool diminishes what I mean. What I mean is I agree wholeheartedly that the multilingual diversity is a powerful good thing. The second thing too, though, is I think what she's saying is we need to, in terms of what you said, is we need to see students. And there's all kinds of reasons why we don't see other people. I'll just give you three. One of them is stereotyping. So the stereotyping could be, it could be about University of Missouri football fans as KU and Missouri get ready. I could have stereotypes about them, or it could be about people from this, people from this country are like this, or different races, or these students, or kids with disabilities, whatever it might be. But what stereotyping does is it assumes that everybody, it's sometimes called essentialism, everybody has the same attribute. And so that means you don't see the person, you see the stereotype. The second thing is our perceptions of reality are limited. We see through a heuristic window or an interpretive window. We don't see everything. Each of us has limited limit of understanding. And so, when you get a new car and you start driving around in this car that's least new to you, all of a sudden everybody else has the same car. It's not like that wasn't happening before, but what it means is you're seeing the world a little bit more differently. That's why video is so important, because you see a bigger world. So that second thing, that interpretive window. And the third thing is judgment. We tend to jump to judgment, and often judgment's based on stereotypes and a limited view of reality. And I think to really see people, we have to really love people, in the sense of a benevolent attitude towards them. And I see who you are as a person. We have to recognize that stereotypes block our view. We have a limited vision of reality, and moralistic judgment is the devil. It destroys healthy relationships. So to me, as I was listening to her, I was thinking a lot, maybe because I'm thinking a lot about perception right now, but those are some things that hit me with that.
Thank you so much, Jim. And thank you to Uliana for her beautiful story. Okay, Jim, who's
What,
next?
why did you choose it though? I want to hear your take. What struck you? You mentioned the stories, but anything else you'd want to add?
It's just that for me, it's that every student who walks into our schools and every student who sits in our classroom has a story. And to just withhold the judgment and sometimes the normal and natural response to get frustrated or to get annoyed or upset, insert other words, with students based on how they might be acting in the classroom. But really, if we don't know what they're going through, know their home environments, know their story, what they might even be battling with, like Uliana mentioned, that her and her family were Spanish speaking at home and she wanted to preserve that. And that's a beautiful story. And if teachers or educators or anyone doesn't take the time to get to know them, I feel like we may not be giving the students our very best each and every day. Not that you need to have a student record a podcast and share their whole story with you, but that's why listening, I believe, is so important even for teachers.
Absolutely. And that things I mentioned interfere with listening. I think
Yes.
they make it harder to listen. Okay, my turn. Mine is a little clip from Natasha Sistrunk Robinson, another one of our keynoters. Natasha was my coach, and she coached me for a while. I've known her. She's come to the institute. We've been friends for a long time. She's a spectacular speaker. She's going to blow people. So is Odiana is going to do it as well. I mean, we're going to have so much happening with these presenters. But anyway, let's play the clip for Natasha. That growth. So in your studies, in your writing, in your work, in your doctorate, you've been focused on leadership. What are a few things you could tell us about as we lead our families, as we lead in schools, as coaches or administrators, as we lead as teachers, as we lead ourselves? What are a few things we should be thinking about with respect to leadership based on all of your experience?
Yeah, I think we wanna be thinking about I think there's a lot of things to think about, but one thing
But
I think it's important as leaders that um, we talked about balance earlier briefly, that we have created for ourselves a community that is supportive and encouraging for when the days get hard and for the days when we want to quit. I think that's very important that we're caring for our own selves, our mental health, our emotional well being, our relationships, so that we can be our best every day. And I think it's easy for us to um, let those important things, whether that's working out or eating well or just having joy and picking up a hobby, to go to the wayside because the needs that we face in our daily lives are so urgent. And it's something I have to remind myself of, like even, just in my personal life, I'm a middle-aged woman. I'm caretaking for my father who lives in another state. I have a child that's transitioning. And I was like, oh, I don't feel good in my body. So I had to make some changes about what I'm doing. And so I think we have to do that. We have to care for ourselves well and not see that as selfish and not see that as an afterthought. Because if we are sick and we don't feel well or we die prematurely, then we are no benefit to the people that love us and we're no benefit for the community that needs us. So I think that's important. And I think the other part of that is making sure that we have our like find our people, that we have a community of people that can support us in things. And sometimes those people are going to be face to face. This is actually a good thing about technology, that we can connect with other people. And sometimes we definitely need to do that. People that are outside of our spaces. This is where coaching comes in, right? That someone who is unbiased and someone who is not impacted by your decisions can come in and be a good sparring partner, a good accountability partner, a good support, an encourager and challenger to you to ensure that you're showing up your best and that you're doing your best work. And so I think just cultivating that right community and support system for yourself is also something important that leaders need to do. Because when we look at the leadership that we are facing in our country today, like we don't get the leaders that we're seeing just like they don't wake up like that. There's a lot of small steps and missteps that have been taken to get us to a place where we have leaders that don't have character. And so we want to be thinking about, okay, what intentional steps do I take so I can be a leader of character and so I can support the other leaders that are doing good in our community so that we can be our best for the community that needs us to be our best.
Jessica,
Yeah.
what's your thoughts?
Well, first, I think that Dr. Sistrunk Robinson needs to record some daily affirmations that I can just play for the first 5 minutes of my morning. Because as she leaves me, you talked about powerhouse keynotes. I think we're going to need some tissues, by the way, in the keynote room. She just leaves me feeling inspired to go off and do great things and to stand up a little taller. So her way of being is really powerful. But Jim, why did you choose this clip?
Well, I like that idea. You have to find your people. And I like it for two reasons. Well, first off, Natasha is pretty special. So it's a treat to show her. I think she says somewhere, I just came out a leader. I mean, that's the way, but she went to, she did all kinds of things. She was a track star, and she was the first person of color, woman of color at the uh, military academy she went to, a leader in the field. And she's so locked in, intentional. So just seeing her for a second is powerful. But I think having your people is important. And there's two parts to that. It's knowing who your people are, and then it's trying to be one of the other people's people. Because I think when you are dealing with the complexities and ambiguities of a school, you can jump to judgment pretty quickly, and you can turn people off. And the first thing is sort of that compassion, to recognize a shared hurt and the difficulties we're dealing with, and we're in the same place. And I'm blessed, I'd say, to have people. So, Christian Van Noorberg is one of my people. He and I are going to do this big hike in a few months. John Campbell's one of my people. He and I talk every week. You're one of my people. It's such a joy to work with you every day. I feel lifted up and energized and life giving in this podcast and our courses we offer. So it is important to have those people, but it's also important to be a people, if that makes sense. That's what struck me about it.
She reminds me of the Dr. Maya Angelou video about being the rainbow in someone's cloud.
Right.
People are that for us. They show up as our rainbow. On a stormy day, we can see the rainbow, but we should also be the rainbow in someone else's cloud. So it really made me think of that. And it also made me think of the importance of who our way of being, back to that as coaches, is that we could cultivate this kind of relationship in our coaching partnerships. But also, we need to be able to walk away from that and say, who will be my person, or who can I be the person for, so that we can take a break from that. And so we can just let our hair down and be a normal human. And in the coaching program that I supported here in the state of Georgia, Jim, we had this saying that was humans first. That was our hashtag for our coaching program, is that just remember, everyone you coach and you as the coach, before anything else, you're a human first. So that's what Natasha leaves me thinking.
I love it. I love it.
Anything else before we move on to Christian?
Just that it's going to be fun. I can't wait. And now I'm excited to hear what Christian's got to share.
So many things. I really liked the podcast with you, Christian, and was it the Indiana Jones of what? Positive psychology?
Positive psychology, yeah.
That made me laugh. And that he had a hat on. I thought, will Jim be okay if I start wearing hats to our podcast?
Yes, absolutely. Bring it on.
Okay, noted. Well, up next is Christian Van Nuremberg, a good friend of yours, Jim. You just mentioned he's one of your people. He's also a professor, a coach, a leader, an author, our colleague. He led the CAP program that, by the way, I just finished, Jim.
You're ahead of me.
He's also a co-author on this wonderful book that they're talking about in this podcast with you, which is Radical Listening. So I really enjoyed this episode, but I want to play for you a clip that stood out to me from Christian. So here we go.
Thank you. I do want to jump in.
Go ahead.
That's going to be the second skill I wanted to mention, Jim, because I do find it difficult. So like I said, the acknowledgement thing, I feel it comes naturally to me. I like doing it. I've had a long life experience of doing that and finding benefits for me and my conversational partner of doing it. Whereas, my mother, the person who brought me up, was Japanese, and she definitely taught me, you never interrupt. And then as I became a coach and I started training other people to become coaches, I was very clear. Part of listening is you just keep quiet. You don't say anything. So, but as we were writing this book, it really became apparent, and maybe this is one element, Jim, of what's radical about this kind of listening, is that we go beyond that kind of rule of turn taking. The rule is the other person's talking, so I mustn't say anything. That's probably good listening, but it's not radical listening. Radical listening is being willing to jump in. That's what we're talking about. With minimal interruptions, or minimal encouragers are a great example, Jim. So if my conversational partner is talking about something, I might want to jump in and say, wow, I can't believe you did that. Or did you celebrate that? Or how amazing was that? And coming back to your point, Jim, it's not interrupting in order to take the floor or take the microphone from the other person. In fact, it's the opposite. We're jumping in because we want them to see that we're fully committed, we're with them. In fact, Jim, I would say that that's the message we're trying to convey all the time in radical listening is I'm with you.
Okay, Jim, before I share my thoughts, can I
I
ask?
wanted to say something.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just kidding. I was just interrupting.
Oh, wait, were you planning that?
Well, it just happened, but go ahead.
Organic
I
interjection.
was just doing it to raise my issues with interrupting, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, I chose this clip because it really challenged me, and it's for all the things that Christian said. When I was growing up as a new instructional coach, I was taught that you sit in your silent and you don't interrupt. And when I was a child, I did not interrupt. And then when I went to school and teachers were, I did not interrupt. So for most of my life, even as an adult educator, I thought, okay, you just don't interrupt when people are talking. And then I began noticing when other people would interrupt, I'm like, okay, well, I saw that person's train of thought get interjected or interrupted. So when Christian said this, and Robert talked about it some too, I thought, oh my gosh, they're right. Because there are moments that people say this profound thing where they celebrate themselves and they just keep on trucking. And you think, oh, I need to remember to celebrate that. But then 5 minutes later, it may not have the same impact. Okay, what do you think?
I'm not so sure.
Okay.
There's a point in the conversation where Robert interrupts
Yes.
in the podcast, and to me, it was kind of jarring. I thought that's not really the way I would want to be, you know. But what I think is this is as a coach, and this is really what Nancy Klein has taught me in her books. As a coach, my job is to help the person think better. So I want to create a situation where they think better. And so if sharing something in the moment helps them think better, I think it's great. But if it distracts them and then they say, oh, now where was I? Then I don't think I've been helpful. It's a little bit like the switch support response Kate Murphy says. When you listen, you can take a new direction with the conversation, or you can provide support. So to me, I'm not sure interrupting is the right way, but supportive responses that don't distract the person, that help them think deeper and go deeper, I think those are fine. But I also would say, I wish Christian was here because he could fight back, but I also would say, I don't probably need to be reminded to interrupt more. What I really need to learn is how to interrupt less. So that's kind of how I see it. So, but the support and switch response, that kind of works for me as a way to do it. But it's interesting. That's what made that whole conversation interesting. And I guess that's a radical listener.
Yes. So if you're interjecting in a supportive way, then that is okay. Well, maybe it's okay. But interjecting in a shifting way, that may not be what's best. And I agree with that idea. In fact, when people interrupt me, everything in my brain just goes away. But to really push myself to give this a try, Jim, and you were in ILC when I did this, I had the pleasure of coaching my dear, dear friend and our colleague, Sonia Pullen, in our Introduction to Leadership coaching course. And I was nervous, of course, but she's a good friend. I felt really comfortable with her. I thought, I'm going to give it a try. I'm going to interject if it feels right. So she had made a comment about she wasn't doing a good job and toward her goal. But I know how hard she's working toward this goal already. So I interjected to acknowledge her, to celebrate all the things she actually is doing. And I was so nervous to do it too. It didn't feel great. But she goes, oh, okay, yeah. And I could see she thought, oh, maybe I am doing more than I was. But I still wasn't quite sold on it.
I thought it went great. I watched that particular interaction and I honestly said, oh, she's trying to interrupt just to see how it feels. I mean, that's what I was thinking as I watched it. And I thought it went great.
Ah, yes, you were on to me. I did that on purpose. Okay.
Okay, so we're calling this the greatest hits thing. But sometimes albums are like there's a lot of hits, a lot of bangers on the album. So like to take the greatest hits from Abbey Road by the Beatles. The Beatles is a group from my youth. I don't know if you've heard of them. But you can't really take the greatest. They're all greatest hits, and that's how I feel about these podcasts. With Hassan, and I was trying to figure out, well, okay, which one am I going to pull? There were just so many clips, but here's one that I thought would be universally of interest. One related to questioning, so we'll play that clip.
And there's no such thing as a neutral question.
Hmm.
So I often ask people, come up with a neutral question. And they say, well, what time is it? Or what's your name? Or, hey, I don't know, what's the weather outside like? And people say, that's a neutral question. Well, relationally speaking, it may not be, because if you ask me what's your name, I have an ethnic name. it may not be neutral. Because every time I have to explain, oh, yeah, this is how you say it. Is that neutral? Or somebody that very good friend of mine who's trans, and she had to really fight for changing the name on her um, graduation certificate because the school refused to change it. So, what's your name? It's not neutral, I can tell you that. So, how's the weather outside? My mom is a golfer. When she asked that question, there is that presupposed sort of request. If is the weather outside good enough for golf? So every question that you think about, it has presuppositions. And sometimes when I listen to clinical conversations and questions used in that setting, and sometimes it's quite heartbreaking. And medical, clinical interviews that you go see a family doctor, and some of the questions are quite intrusive. And you wouldn't actually ask your friends those questions, but your doctors can.
Mhm.
And I think another question, another example I can give you is when I was going through before my father passed, there was leading up to that time that I was a primary caregiver,
Mhm.
and especially leading up to that time, it was difficult. It was very challenging and taking care of all these things. And whenever people ask me, "How are you?" and
Yeah.
"How are you?" is just a greeting. I know it, but I'm sensitive to those things. When
Mm.
people say, "How are you?" I had to try so hard to not break down.
Mhm.
"How are you?" was never neutral to me during that time.
Mm.
So I can give you those examples after examples, but in coaching, somehow we need to be very careful not to intrude. Because every question is asking, it's requesting for information that you don't even know um, how it's going to land for that person. So intrusion. So I think questions, we got to be careful with what kind of quest we are requesting from the other person. So yeah, in my mind, questions are very intrusive.
What's your thoughts there, Jessica?
I agree with Dr. Moon. In fact, I sent you a message after I watched this episode on YouTube, and I said, I think one of the questions that we are about to ask in one of our workshops is an intrusive question because there is an assumption inherent in that question, which was, what is something you've been putting off at work? The assumption is people have been putting things off at work. So it really got me thinking, as we coach people, how often are we asking unintentional, intrusive questions? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm with you. I thought it was such a great concept to pause and reflect. And people are pretty good at hiding what's processing in them, and so that's why I think it's so helpful to think about this. A long time ago, I was interviewing people prior to a keynote. I had to give a keynote on inclusive instruction for special ed. And I was in Ocean City, Maryland. And the day before, I thought, I want to build this around people's ideas who come to the conference. They had other things. So they set up a bunch of people for me to interview. So I interviewed them all day, and then I put their ideas together and I presented them in the conversation and the conference the next day. And this one person said she was really interested in differentiated instruction. And so I said, "Oh, really? Differentiated instruction? Tell me, how do you balance out this and how do you do this?" And I had all these questions about it. I was really curious. And she looked at me and she said, "I don't like how this conversation's going." So she felt that my questions were like pushing her and sort of suggesting the differentiated instruction didn't work. And and I hadn't really thought about if I was on her end and I was hearing those questions, I might feel exactly the same way. So I think she's really got a great point. We really need to think about how do these questions land? And they're almost always going to be intrusive to some extent. On a scale of 1 to 10, that's none of your business. So it's just I thought it was really, really insightful. But like I said, the podcast is packed with gems just like that. She's kind of a linguist. She really, really understands language at a deep level. She really considers language, so that gives her a rich perspective on what it means to be a coach.
Yes. Well, thanks, Jim. And we'll hear from Dr. Moon again in just a moment. But now we're heading over to that Indiana Jones character from Positive Psychology, Robert Biswas-Diener. And he and his co author, Christian Van Nieuwerburg, were in your podcast about their book, Radical Learners. I could go on about this podcast, but I'll keep it short. I really liked what he said about another skill. So I'm going to play that clip for you, Jim.
It comes easily to me. It's
Do
not
do you mind if I jump in, Christian? I'm
Sure.
sorry. I want to add before you go on to the next skill.
Please, because the next one is interjection. So, Robert, you're demonstrating this for us now.
Excellent. I think there are some times that people do some things that feel like acknowledgement that are very well intentioned, but that can sometimes go off the rails. And two of these we call comparing and competing. So someone might be telling you a story. Oh, I went to Hong Kong last summer, and you blurt out, "Wow, you know what? I went to Hong Kong last summer," and that feels to you like an acknowledgement of their experience. And you're trying to find common ground. It's motivated by a sense of connection. We have something in common here. And yet it runs the risk of sort of making it about you, taking the spotlight away from them. It can feel like an interruption. It doesn't necessarily, but it runs that risk. And then its conceptual cousin, competing, is very much the same. They say, "Oh, I'm so tired. I only got 6 hours of sleep last night." And you're like, 6 hours of sleep? I only got 4 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
And again, you're trying to get across to them, I acknowledge you, I understand, I also am sleep deprived, but it runs the risk again by saying, oh, I'm playing a game of one-upsmanship. So sometimes acknowledgement feels like what we're doing, but it doesn't always land that way.
Such a great clip, and it also demonstrates that interrupting thing. It felt a little funny to me, but I'm so glad he shared what he shared. Now, what struck you about that?
Two things, actually. First is I find it really challenging to connect with people who have the autobiographical listening, so to speak, the lens where they want to jump in and do what Robert did, where he's like, oh, yeah, you got 6 hours of sleep, must be nice. I got 4. I find that shift, to use Kate Murphy's language, the shift distracts me, but it also interferes with my trust or the psychological safety that I feel in that conversation. And the second reason I chose this clip is because we're often asked, Jim, how do you build trust in coaching partnerships? And that question, I'm now playing Dr. Moon's thoughts in my head, has the assumption that it's separate, that you have to build trust and then you coach people. There's like these two separate things, but it's really not. It's in the way that we show up. And people who might listen through this lens of interrupting to have the autobiographical comment really are not building trust, whereas people who listen and support maybe are building trust more. So just lots of thoughts. But what about you? What do you think?
Well, I love what you said. I think that's so true. When you look at the writing on trust, what erodes trust? Self-centeredness. And if it's all about me, then it's hard for people to trust me. And to say, oh, let me tell you, my life is harder. Oh, I went there and this is what I did. And then we did to make it competitive or self-centered is going to probably erode trust. I think that's a brilliant insight, which I hadn't thought of until you said it. It also reminds me of this great Monty Python clip where there's a bunch of people sitting around a table and they're like, you had to live in a pond. We had the luxury, this big fight. And eventually, like, we had to get up half an hour before we went to sleep. And it just gets worse and worse and worse as they compete. So I would say you could add a little Monty Python to that. It'd be great. Okay, the last clip is Hassan, and she's talking about TLC. So let's roll a clip.
And TLC was my first time walking in. There are so many people, Jim. There was like tables of tables. I don't know how many people were there, like 1,300 or something crazy like that. And it's just a huge room packed with people. And then it was my first time. It's so hard to feel like I am home. I belong here. And that's how I felt, Jim. Because there's something about, not just because they're educators, but something about it's not just the content. Content, yes, but maybe something is a common purpose all of us actually had. It's something to do with changing conversations and something to do with the relational approach and really wanting something better for our next generation. And I think some people are so passionate. I am really passionate because, Jim, if we can change the conversations today, we're going to have a completely different society in 10 years when those kids grow up.
Mhm.
So, how do we do this? And I felt right at home. So, I mean, that's how I remember this. And I can't wait to be there because I'm like, I'm coming home. So it was like that was the feel that I actually got. And I'm so happy I'm part of this community now because really it's my home.
Okay, Jessica, what are you looking forward to at TLC?
Well, I want to steal her words and say it's going to feel like home. What lots of things. First is that it's just very energizing to be around so many people who believe in the same thing, that when we have educators who collaborate and learn and focus on wonderful professional development like instructional coaching, that we can do what's best for students. But also just the energy everywhere you go, whether it's in line for lunch, going to the bathroom, getting your afternoon cookie, looking at the books, or a session, people are just really happy to be there. It's a happy place.
Yeah, it's kind of the double thing of all these great ideas and all these great people. And so you have this sense of, oh, these are my people, as Natasha says. And man, I never thought about that. I can use that. That's so helpful. Oh, what did you do? And there's that sense of collaborative learning along with listening to in this particular year, because we're focused on learning from experience. This year should be sort of double whammy, super practical, super inspirational. And one thing I want to mention too is weren't able to show Kim Scott's hot greatest hits, but I recommend people go back and check out her podcast because she has brilliant things to say about when do you tell and when do you listen and when do you ask questions, and when you have to say something, how do you say it in a way that's humanizing and not dehumanizing. It's really, really a great podcast. You don't have time for the podcast, just come to TLC and you can either see her there or you can watch it virtually. I really recommend people watch the conference virtually. We've got 90 days. It could become the professional development for coaches to watch it together and discuss it. I think there's lots of options.
Wonderful, Jim. Was there anything else you'd like to say about TLC before we wrap up?
I can't wait. I'm so excited. I'm looking forward to it. How about you?
Yes, I can't believe it's only a month away. So I'm just really excited. I can't wait to see some of the people we've seen in person for a few years now. So yeah, it's gonna be great. All right. Well, thank you so much to everyone for listening today. If you found today's episode helpful, it would help us if you liked or followed the podcast. You can also leave us a rating or a comment so we can continue creating meaningful content just for you. Thank you. And until next time, go forth and lead great coaching conversations. And whether virtual or in person, we hope to see you at TLC. Thank you, Jim.
Hey, thanks, Jessica.